Hi, I'm Mr. Tester, and I'm the carpentry teacher for Science Hill High School Alternative Center. And for today's lesson, I'm going to show the safe and proper usage of a sliding compound miter saw. And first and foremost, with any power tool in my shop, the first thing we do is put on our safety glasses. Now, the sliding compound miter saw that we use in our shop is a DeWalt, and the term sliding compound miter saw, it has multiple features that allow you to make many different types of cuts. It allows you to make angled cuts, it allows you to make bevels, or a combination of the two. So there's where the compound comes into play. Now, the sliding feature with this saw, you can see how the saw slides in and out. What that allows you to do is the sliding allows you to cut a lot wider stock than you would be able to if it wasn't a sliding saw. So the thing that I want to get into to begin with is how not to make a cut. The miter saw is designed to make cross cuts. So what that means is you're making a cut across the grain of the wood. If we were making a cut along the grain lengthwise, that would be a rip cut, and the tool to make a rip cut would be the table saw. But for today's lesson, we're only going to concentrate on cross cuts. So with that said, I never want to see any of my students trying some maneuver like this to try to make a rip cut with this saw. That's a big no-no. The next thing that I'd like to explain is this miter saw has what's called a fence. So this vertical wall at the back of the saw is called the fence. Your stock must always rest against the back of that fence, or must touch that fence when you make the cut, because with the force of the blade pushing on your board, that fence supports the wood. So I've seen more near misses or almost accidents by somebody coming up to the saw with a board and trying to make a cut out here, and as soon as that blade touches that wood, it wants to shoot it towards the back. So the biggest safety thing to keep in mind is to keep it up against the fence, and also don't make rip cuts with the miter saw. And like I said, the sliding feature allows you to cut wider boards, wider stock. Now, the miter saw has a gauge or a dial down here at the bottom, and that gauge, if you line up the needle, you can line up that needle with these different degrees, so that will allow you to rotate the saw around and make an angled cut. So if I were to set the saw on 45 degrees, you might be able to see there that the needle's on the 45, and there are multiple notches here in that dial. Those are convenient locations for degrees that are cut a lot in the industry. So 45 degree is a common cut that you would make. So I've locked it on 45 degrees, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate a cut. Also, what I instruct my students to do is, after they make a cut, to release the trigger and allow that blade to stop, come to a complete stop before raising it back up. That's just another added safety feature. So you can see that I waited until the blade stopped and then raised the saw back up. So that was an angle cut. So you can see on the board that makes a cut with an angle. Okay, I'm going to rotate the saw back to 90 degrees, or in this case it's set to 0 degrees. So which will give you a 90-degree right angle. Wait till the blade stops, raise it up. Okay, the next type of cut that I'm going to make is a bevel cut. Okay, so I'm not changing the angle, but I'm going to change the way that this the head on this saw lays over. So it has a knob in the back that you loosen. You set it to whichever degree you're cutting. So right now I'm going to demonstrate at a 25-degree angle just for the demonstration. Lock it down tight. Wait till the blade stops, raise it up, and you can see how this cut, unlike an angle cut, it's created a bevel on this stock. Okay, now there are times in the construction industry that you might need to make a compound cut, and like I said earlier, that a compound would be a bevel and an angle at the same time. So I'm going to demonstrate that. So the saw is leaned over for a bevel cut, and then I'm going to make an angle cut at the same time. And one thing you want to keep in mind when making a cut, you're not wanting to force that blade through the stock. You want to go nice and slow, let the blade do the work, and you're just easing it through the stock. So here would be a compound angle. Okay, so it's angled this way, but it also has a bevel. So that's a compound cut. Okay. Set everything back to 0. And one of the things that I instruct my students to do when they're finished up making a cut or finished up with this station is I want them to lock the blade down in the lower position. So to lock the saw, there's a lock back here in the back that locks it down into position. And again, as a close-up of the lock, this right here, there's not much to it, but I just tell my students that when you're finished with this station, to lock the saw down into place. Okay, to summarize this tool, it's the sliding compound miter saw. If we need to make an angle cut, that's called a miter cut. If we needed to make a bevel cut, you would take the head of the saw, lean it over, and then the sliding feature, the sliding part of this saw, allows you to make a cut on a wider stock. Now I want to finish up with safety for this saw. The first thing we do is we wear safety glasses when using this saw. Number 2, we don't make any rip cuts with the miter saw. The miter saw is used for cross cuts only. The third thing, we want to have our stock up against the fence before we make that cut. So always have your stock up against the fence, And the fourth thing, if you need to make any kind of adjustments, if you need to change the blade, if you need to do any kind of servicing with this saw, you need to unplug it before doing any kind of servicing. Again, I'm Mr. Tester with Science Hill High School Alternative Center. Thank you.